Welcome, everybody, to This Week in Legal Blogging, presented by LexBlog. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog Law Sites and host the podcast Law Next. And as usual with this show, we are interviewing prominent bloggers about how they got started and what their blogs are all about and whatever else we choose to talk about. All of the past episodes of this show are available on YouTube at youtube.com/LexBlog. Today, I am very happy to welcome to the show Angelo Paparelli. Angelo, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bob. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you. Angelo is a partner at Seyfarth and author of the blog Nation of Immigrators, which one of the things I always do when I'm doing these interviews is kind of go back and look at the very first post you ever wrote. And in that very first post, you answer the very first question I had, which is, why didn't you call it Nation of Immigrants? So why didn't you?
Well, first of all, that goes back to 2004, and I frankly can't remember. But I'll riff with you and suggest that the Nation of Immigrants did not give enough focus on the full ecosystem, all of the stakeholders in the immigration process. And I tried to find a word that would embrace U.S. citizens who benefit from the immigration system, U.S. businesses, the government officials that are involved, the lawyers who are involved. And we're all immigrators, one way or the other. Even Stephen Miller might be an immigrator as much as he might not want to recognize that.
Right. And you actually do kind of address that, even though it was 16 years ago in that first post. You talk about, that there are a number of different viewpoints and attitudes, some enlightened, some unenlightened, I guess, around immigration issues. And what you and I have in common is that we are both the grandchildren of Italian immigrants. Where did your family come from?
Well, on my dad's side of the family, they came from a city named Valmontone. It's a town about an hour south of Rome on the Autostrada. Best known these days for an amusement park, which is probably shut down because of the pandemic, right. And a variety of outlet stores. So that's its claim to fame. On my mother's side, it's a little village mountain town called San Giovanni in Fiore, which means St. John among the flowers. And it's a lovely place, and I've been to both of them.
In which mountains? In the northern Italy?
No, southern Italian,
okay.
Calabria.
Okay.
Not too far from Cosenza.
Okay. Well, I am of northern Italian heritage. My grandparents were from a little town called Brenzoni right on Lake Garda, on Lago di Garda, in northern Italy. Yes. Beautiful area up there. And I was just about a year ago was out there snooping around trying to find some records about their heritage there. I did not get too far, but was that part of what got you interested in immigration in the first place?
I think in a kind of a karmic sense, yes. My grandmother was, on my dad's side, was an entrepreneur. She came with almost nothing, started a boarding house, started a bakery, started a soda pop company, and it became a large chain in southeastern Michigan of wedding banquet halls. And when I grew up, she was a very powerful woman. If you can imagine an Italian Marjorie Main from the 30s, she was take no prisoners, very tough, gruff person. And one day I went with her. My dad was driving her to the immigration service office, and she had the occasion to sponsor a relative from Italy. And the officer at the window was extremely rude to my grandmother. Now, I had never witnessed rudeness to my grandmother, and I was looking forward. I was licking my chops, waiting to see what my grandmother would say in response. And instead, she sort of like melted like the Wicked Witch when Dorothy threw the water on her. She was just subservient and obsequious, and it just blew my mind. that this powerful woman was shaking in her boots, so to speak. And so that had an effect. But beyond that, in college, I traveled around a bit and spent a fair amount of time in Europe and Italy particularly. And it opened my eyes to the bigger world. And I met people along the way, and it just made me very attuned to my own heritage and to the whole process of America being a nation of immigrants.
Yeah. You started your blog before you were at Seyfarth. I think you had your own firm at that point. What motivated you to start a blog? That was in 2004. That was still pretty early in the days of blogging.
It was mostly mental health. I was getting increasingly outraged at the messaging from the media about immigration. This was the heyday of Lou Dobbs and his show talking about broken borders and demonizing immigrants. And it was contrary to all of the people that I knew who had gone through the immigration process. Yes, we have a large undocumented population, but we have a huge population of strivers and achievers who follow the rules, and as complicated and difficult as they may be, and contributed great things to this country. And so I just had to speak out. I also saw a fair amount of heavy-handedness on the part of the government and injustice and deprivations of due process. And so I was either going to climb the walls in my office and just be frustrated, or I was going to save money on mental health therapy bills and do a blog.
I should say the tagline on your blog is a public policy blog on America's dysfunctional immigration system. So back in 2004, did you think you'd write about this for a few years and then the dysfunction would all go away and everything would be rosy?
No, I never thought the dysfunction would go away, but I was not much of a soothsayer because I never realized it would become as atrocious and disappointing, disheartening as it is today. So there's a longevity to my theme.
Yeah, unfortunately there is. I mean, it's ironic, unfortunately, that I'm sure you've never had a shortage of stuff to write about in your blog over the years.
No, I've had plenty of topics. I think I should share with you that I could spend my entire career, my entire human existence, blogging on the subject of immigration law and not really doing much more than skimming the surface. I was heartened recently. I'm not often in agreement with Justice Clarence Thomas, but he, in the case dealing with the Dreamers and DACA, in dissent, made the statement that the immigration statutes contain a level of granular specificity that is exceedingly rare in the modern administrative state. And I find that to be accurate, and that one of the motivations for me to write the blog was I had seen so many well-intentioned journalists misunderstand basic immigration concepts, and I had seen so much fake news around what immigration really was, although that wasn't the phrase we used in those days. And I said, I'm going to try to communicate in a way that, number one, will be entertaining to me. I want to make it lighthearted. I want to write for a lay audience, but I also want people who are really deep in the subject to appreciate the points I make. So that's what I try to do. I've always thought that I try to write in a New York Times kind of style, but maybe a little breezier and funnier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a difficult balance to maintain, isn't it? Writing both for a fairly sophisticated audience, but also a more general audience. How do you do that?
Well, that's partly the wonders of hyperlinks. You can bury a lot of accessible information into a hyperlink as you continue to blog. And so it avoids the usual legal trappings of footnotes. And I've just found that I try to pitch it to an intelligent audience willing to invest a little bit of time to understand the system, understand the process. But I also try to make it entertaining and light, because otherwise it's just going to go into the dustbin of history, so to speak.
I'm curious, and I didn't mention this, but it's probably obvious that your law practice focuses on immigration. I think you also do labor and employment work, if I understand as well. And you joined Seyfarth in 2009, if I have that date right. How was the firm receptive to your blog when you went there? Were there other blogs there at that time? I know they have a number of other blogs now, but what was it like in 2009?
There were no blogs, and it was interesting because on the one hand, candidly, the firm found the blog a fascination, but on the other hand, I was writing in a rather controversial style and not what a law firm might expect. So two things happened. They saw that blogging had real opportunity for communicating to a potential client base, legal development, legal challenges, solutions. And so mine was sort of the poster child for what are now, I think we probably have 15 or 20 blogs. I'm not sure.
I think they have 19. I counted.
Okay.
If I'm right, yeah.
Well, thank you. But on the other hand, if you look at the disclaimer in my blog, it says that my firm takes no responsibility whatsoever for the contents of my blog, and it's my opinion only, and it's not legal advice. So I'm relatively free within the bounds of good taste and prudence to say almost anything I want as long as I can defend it. And that's heartening in a large law firm. I think if I had come up as an associate, I wouldn't have that freedom.
What about your clients? I mean, you are opinionated on your blog. You take very clear stands on issues. Are you ever, is that ever an issue for your clients? Are you ever at odds with your clients in the positions that you take?
Well, I have never had it be a problem. I've had clients be very complimentary about the blog. I have had occasions when I have pushed the conversation in the direction the client wanted it to go. The usual thing about immigration law is that we represent human beings as well as juridical persons, right. And so every juridical person has an occupant that's a human being with a heartbeat, and so I like to try and get them to see the wisdom of the points I'm encouraging, and I frankly believe in them. I think that immigration is good for America. So I've not had that happen. I have had one occasion where a very right-wing publication had a immigration officer call me a treason lawyer. And if you blog the words treason lawyer in my name, you'll find it. But it's kind of a mark of honor because it predates the grant or the inauguration of the DACA program by President Obama, because that's what I was blogging about that so annoyed that particular officer. So I'll leave it to historians to say whether I was treasonous or not, but I've had interesting experiences. There have been interesting ones that I can recount, for example, very briefly, but I believe that there is a unit of the agency that grants immigration benefits that is acting in a way that is completely illegal, in that it investigates immigration frauds and crimes. And I accused that unit of being a cancer on the immigration agency. And I was later invited by the Office of the Ombudsman of USCIS, the agency, to talk about blogging. And in anticipation of that, I went to my Google thread to see who was reading it. And lo and behold, I had 1,200 hits from the Department of Homeland Security on that particular post. So that illustrates for me why my blog makes a difference. I'm not really out there for all the eyeballs in the world. In fact, I wouldn't put my traffic next to yours anytime. But what I do want to do is I want to move the conversation. And I think blogging has allowed me to be seen as a thought leader. And that's a real primary reason why I blog.
Well, a point we've made on this very program any number of times with other bloggers I've talked to has been that it ain't about the numbers. It's about who you're reaching and who's reading you, and whether you're reaching the people that you want to be reaching and that matter in terms of your topic. And it sounds like you're doing that. Yeah,
I had an occasion once where I was on the phone, and it's rare that you can get on the phone with a government official anymore. Because they've walled themselves off.
Yeah.
But I was on the phone with a senior immigration official out in California, and there was about to be a major commemoration of an event for an organization where they were going to have significant entertainment from abroad. And I can't get into the details, but other than to say,
I won't tell anyone. It's okay.
That's okay, but call me later. But the point was, it was 2 days away from the event, and these people were coming from Russia. And unless this person did what I needed to have done, the event would be destroyed because they were going to perform with a well-known artist in America. And the question was, is fusion of foreign culture and American culture appropriate for the visa category? And then just briefly, I persuaded him of the following, that it was reasonable, that it was an argument to be made. And he told me, Angelo, I'm going to give you this one this time, but I want you to know, not next time. And I also want to say, don't blog about me. So I have not blogged about him.
Yeah, good. So you've stirred up some controversy with your blog. What's been the impact, do you think, on your own career, on your own practice from blogging?
Oh, it's been tremendous. Blogging has opened doors for me. It has, especially in the pandemic. I mean, it has the advantage of not having to press the flesh at conferences and at liaison meetings of government officials and still make an impact. It gets through. They read the blog, and they've told me they've read the blog. And they've announced publicly at forums that they read my blog. And I'll tell you a funny little story. A previous director of USCIS was miffed at me. I had created an imaginary award called the Emmy. And I conferred it on a number of people in the immigration space, and I sort of slammed his agency with a snide remark that he wasn't very quick. It wasn't very quick in solving problems, and he once took me to task on a public engagement because I overlooked an instance in which his agency was very speedy, and I should have complimented him on it. Now, this is a fictional award meant in jest, and anyone that read it would know this, but he took it personally that my fictional award didn't give him the credit he thought he was due. So, it's been just wonderful. And in terms of client development, I will say that a blog is a credentialing feature. I do a fair number of blogs. We haven't talked about the type of blogging, but I do a fair number of blogs that are just educational, that help people to understand how the process actually works. And I've welcomed guest columnists in as well. And many times I'm called by a prospective client and they want to know something about the subject matter. I tell them when we get off the call, I'm going to send you something. And usually I have 2 or 3 blog posts that are directly relevant to their problem, that save them lots and lots of time and energy coming up to speed on their own in terms of what the immigration world is all about. I also use it as my archive for government resources because, again, hyperlinks.
Yeah. You teased me before the call started that you take a different approach to blogging. Is that different approach something we've already talked about, or what did you mean by that when you said that?
Well, what I meant by it is that, number one, I am not much impressed with lawyers who try to be the first one on the block to report that there is a new case or a new regulation or a new law. And what they do is they offer a simple narrative of what the law provides. My approach is to spend as little time as necessary to narrate what the new development might be, but then to spend the major part of my time analyzing how does this affect you? What should you do about it? What are the things you can do either to embrace or avoid the new development? And I also try to be funny about it and to write it as a form of modern day literature. That said, I can't be publishing on every single topic and every new development, or I really wouldn't have time to go and be with my family, eat a meal, or do anything else.
Right.
So I'm much more picky and choosy about what I write. And there are always 2 or 3 topics sort of roaming around my mind. And I don't really wait for my muse. I know when there's something there, and I just sit down and I write it, even if I don't feel like it. And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah. See, I'd argue that there's probably a place for both kinds of blogs for those who are reporting the stuff as it's happening, because there aren't, the traditional news media isn't reporting that stuff, and it's difficult to find sources that are reporting that stuff. So if a lawyer is going to blog the case that came down today, I think that's great. And then what you're doing complements and enhances that, and together those, are all the more valuable, I think. Those
well, first of all, I would say that Law 360 and Bloomberg Law are getting better and better at that.
Yeah, but you're at Seyfarth. You can afford Law 360. Most lawyers can't afford Law 360.
Well, the COVID issues on Law 360 are free, so you can at least do that. But
that's true.
You're correct. That is a pricey source. But again, if your target audience is our corporate counsel, they can afford Law 360. And so what I have found is that there's a pressure within our organization, and I'm a founder of the Alliance of Business Immigration Lawyers, which is a think tank of invitation-only immigration lawyers who I think are the creme de la creme. And they have bloggers as well. And many times there's a sort of race to be the first one on the block to announce something. And then it becomes a catch-up defensive, well, so-and-so had it on their blog, and how come you didn't? And so I have to do a little bit of that, but I'd much rather be known for the in-depth analysis, the new take, the nugget of actionable information, than the reportage of being newsworthy in the moment.
Yeah, I totally understand that. One of the things it seems to me clear about you from your career is that you were a writer before you were a blogger. You were already, I think, producing other kinds of publications and doing a lot of writing. And I think you have a lot of, I know you've published a couple of different articles and presentations about how to write for blogs and how to write generally. You just alluded to the fact that you don't wait for the muse to come. You just kind of get in there and start doing it. I think, which is actually covered in one of the presentations that you did on writing. The idea that I think I forget which artist you quoted. Was it Picasso who said, "When the muse comes looking for me, I'll be busy painting," or something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But what are some of your thoughts about how to
find that on LinkedIn? It's a slide deck called "Language is the Skin of the Soul."
Yeah.
What are my thoughts about what?
Well, what are some of your top thoughts about how to write effectively on a blog?
Well, Yeah, the first thing is to just pick up a copy of Strunk and White, The Elements of Style, and use active verbs, use short sentences interspersed with longer sentences, um, show some passion, show some interest, try to entertain. I have this theory that if you can entertain, they will remember you, sort of like Maya Angelou's. They won't remember what you said, but how you treated them or how they felt around you. I like to think that if I can entertain someone, it'll make them want to absorb my message more so than if I just impress them with my knowledge. And so um, I think writing is about connection and putting yourself in the shoes of the audience. And there are a lot of stuff that we all have to read that's kind of boring. And if you can just try and be a little bit entertaining, I mean, I have a rather simple formula. I don't know if your audience might find this of interest, but I have a very simple formula that if you looked at any of my blogs or my articles, you would see it in a minute. But people, I haven't seen people use it often. Basically, I spent a lot of time on the title. I spent a lot of time on the first paragraph to try to get people just sucked right into what I'm about to tell them. The narrative of what happened, I don't spend much time on. I spent a lot of time on the analysis and what this means for you and how you can use it. And then I use a simple comic sort of thing. I do a callback. I make reference to whatever I said in the title or the first paragraph as part of the conclusion. And it's such a simple formula, but it works like a charm.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of your pieces of advice you've offered is to write like you're writing for, well, in one article you wrote, you don't write like a journalist, not like a lawyer. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that's in a way the classic journalistic style is to grab them with the headline and the first paragraph and bring them in and then kind of bring it full circle when you get to the end of the piece.
Except I want to smile
Yeah.
as they're reading it.
Yeah. Do you think your readership, how has your readership changed over the years of doing this, over the 16 years you've been blogging? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I think I do. I have a lot more of a global reach now. Um, there are people who will reach out to me from anywhere in the world, where in the old days of writing articles that were published on paper,
Yeah.
the chance of reaching someone is pretty remote. And
Right.
I've actually, I don't look at my blogging in isolation. I also look at my social media presence, and I put them all together. And so I've had the occasion of being communicated with by a combination of my blog and my tweet stream, and have met some of the most interesting people in the world. Some famous people, some not so famous people, but people who are really authentic human beings, strivers, achievers. And it's been fun. It's been fun. It's especially during a pandemic when you feel so isolated,
Right.
to have someone out of the blue reach out and say something. I like what you wrote. Yesterday, I got an email from someone who's putting together a white paper on artists and entertainers. It's actually a professional organization that's devoted to artist and entertainment immigration. And they asked me if I would allow them to attribute to me a quote about a particular immigration policy that when I wrote it, I didn't even think of artists or entertainers, but they found it helpful and useful. And I said, sure. Just spell my name correctly. That's all.
Yeah.
And don't call me. You can call me late for dinner, but just spell my name correctly.
Right. Just get the name right. Is one of the pieces of advice that you give in that in the presentation that's up on your LinkedIn profile is to persuade with visuals. Do you use visuals in your blog, and how so?
I'm kind of lazy in that regard. I could do a lot better, but I do. I have a clipping, or I should say, an image service that I use. It's not the best, but it's affordable, and again, it's my blog, so I have to pay for it. But I always try to put together an interesting visual with a that's somehow connected, but not too obviously so, to the theme of the blog. I have a discussion with a friend of mine who you might want to have on your show. His name is Cyrus Mehta, and Cyrus writes the Insightful Immigration blog. And I said, Insightful. I mean, Cyrus, you have this wonderful blog. His philosophy is different. It's much more scholarly than mine, but it's always this mural of the New York Harbor with the Statue of Liberty. And I said, why don't you put some pictures in? And he just says, I want to be known. I'm paraphrasing, but he says, I want to be known by the content of my work and not by the logo or a changing picture each time. But we both are good friends, and we've been blogging separately for years and years and years. And he's another illustration of how blogging can make a tremendous difference.
Yeah. Well, so that raises a question. Let's pretend I'm a young immigration lawyer just starting out, and I'm thinking maybe I want to start a blog. But I know you're out there, and Cyrus is out there. You know, Greg Suskind is out there. Any number of people who are already blogging about immigration law topics. Can somebody start up an immigration law blog at this point and get attention and get readership? And how do they do that?
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be an immigration lawyer. It can be any lawyer.
Yeah.
In a big firm, there are certain constraints and certain approvals as to what you can write about. But rarely is it the case that you can't identify a legal problem, a legal issue that an insightful attorney who's succeeding in their career already can't leverage that into a blog. Now, it might be on a very narrow theme, but it's one that will have legs, one that you can write on over and over and over again. Immigration lawyers have it pretty easy because our themes are always in the news day after day after day. But I would venture to suggest that even if you were a dirt lawyer, real estate, there are some themes that you have to deal with. Maybe the theme is the obnoxious negotiator on the other side, and you just illustrate with humorous episodes the brass, rude, insensitive nature of your opponent, without naming them, of course, and without getting yourself involved in defamation. But maybe that's the angle. But I would suggest that every practice area you can start today. And I mean, look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, or the Dow Jones top 50 stocks. A lot of them didn't exist earlier, and they're now at the top of the world. So, and we also have mortality. We older bloggers who and perhaps facing the prospect of retirement. Not me. I'm going to fight for quite a while. I'm sort of torn. I don't know if you remember the first episode of L.A. Law, the old TV show where it's a Saturday morning, they pan into the law firm, it's empty, and then they go into the conference room, and there is a tax lawyer who has died. Rigor mortis has set in, and he's holding a tax code in his hand as his face fell into a paper plate of beans.
I do. Now that you say that, I do remember that. Yeah.
I know I don't want to go that way, but I still have a lot of fire in the fireplace. Let's put it that way. And I welcome other bloggers. I've invited a lot of people to blog on my blog and give them a platform. And so there are many ways, ways to enter the space.
Yeah. Well, since you alluded to your age and the length of time you've been blogging, do you think it's changed? Do you think blogging has changed? Not just your blog or your readership, but do you think blogging in general has changed over the years that you've been doing it?
Well, you distinguish between the technical side of it, yes. LexBlog has all sorts of features underlying its WordPress platform, and I love LexBlog, by the way. I want to give that plug because they've been very, very, I want to sound like that Saturday Night Live episode. LexBlog's been very, very good to me.
Yeah. Well,
but
yeah, your commission check is on the way. Just to let you know.
I didn't start with LexBlog, by the way. But the point is, there's that, but then there's just the pure joy of quality writing.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. That only depends on the pen or the keyboard of the author. And that continues to, I shouldn't say it hasn't changed. It changes every day with the talent of new entrants into the field.
Yeah. One something that's very clear from reading your blog and from speaking to you is that you are passionate about the topic that you write about. How important is that to the success of a blog? How important is passion to the success of a blog?
I think it's a critical element. I don't think you can fake this stuff. If you don't care about what you're writing about, don't torture people with the illusion that you do and get them to read it. Because there's got to be a heart behind the head or underneath the head.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder whether there's a head there at all on my own blog, but that's a whole other story. Any other advice for somebody starting out in blogging or wanting to improve or enhance their blog? Anything else that you've kind of learned about this that we haven't already touched on here?
Well, I would say that it's tough in the field of law today because of all of the factors that you've so ably described in terms of the trends and the external competitors and the commoditization of law. It's all very tough. It's all very dispiriting. But I basically came to the conclusion that if I didn't get the door to knock, I would starve, because the only other being on the other side of the door was the wolf, and that I had to keep the music playing. And so do this as part of a suite of strategies, not just as your sole source of sustenance or inspiration. So be on social media, have your LinkedIn profile as up to date as it possibly can, engage with the world. And when we go back to in-person human beings meeting one another, do that as well. But right now, if you're in a cloistered setting where you can't get out, this is what better use of your time beyond hopefully daily meditation and some exercise and interaction with your family. This is a perfect setting in which the author and you can come out. But just don't do it only with blogging. It's got to be all those things.
Well, I fully agree with you on that, and it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today about blogging and to get to meet you and talk to you. Thanks so much for doing this today.
Oh, it's been fun. It's been great fun. Thank you. I'm honored.
So that does it for today. We've been speaking with Angelo Paparelli, whose blog is Nation of Immigrators. And as I said earlier, you can find all of the episodes of our This Week in Legal Blogging series at youtube.com/LexBlog. And we are going to be back here again next Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern time with another episode. So watch for us then. Thanks for tuning in today. This is Bob Ambrogi.